So welcome to the Femsplainers. I'm Danielle Crittenden, and this is our COVID Valentine's Day special. Sounds depressing, but here to make it less depressing, especially for our listeners who are single, is dating coach extraordinaire, Evan Marc Katz. Hello, Evan. Welcome to the program. Welcome back to the program.
It's really good to be here. The fact that you had me back for a second time means the world, and I'm going to do at least 25% better this time around.
I don't know that you can do better, but I just for those of you who did not hear Evan the first time, it was sometime last year, it wasn't our Valentine's Day, but you are billed as a personal trainer for smart, strong, successful women. You've been doing this since 2003. You were an early Cyrano, I believe, for people writing their, whatever it was, what was it, Match.com profiles, but pretty much their online dating profiles. And then you got into coaching, and now you can have like a big McDonald's sign over your Love You, right? It's Love You as in university website that says over 12,000 women served. That doesn't sound like
it makes me sound a little bit more like Wilt Chamberlain than I want to advertise, but yeah,
helped.
I'm kind of like the original, and there's a million people. You could get off the phone with me and become a dating coach, and the qualifications are minimal. But when I started this thing, I was the first. And I've been very fortunate to grow and evolve over time, from being a single guy giving dating advice to being a long-time married guy giving dating advice, and learning from the women that I coach to customize my services to meet their needs. So anytime you think you got it all figured out, it changes. Love You is a 6-month course, but I added 6 months of coaching on top of it at the beginning of this year because people need more support. People don't have it all figured out after 6 months as much as I'd like them to. So, well, and it should also be said on your website, which I love, you have a lot of you're going against, the old dating advice of why buy the cow when they're giving the milk away for free. You give away a lot of good free advice with your podcast and on your website, and the determined should absolutely take your course. But as you say, things change all the time, and none of us expected to be in COVID quarantine this long. And I have to imagine that this has been terribly hard on singles and, of course, been very hard on dating. What have you found in your practice over the past year? How is it going for people? Well, let me tackle that in a couple of different ways, because as always, the answer is kind of nuanced. Whatever I'm about to share does not negate the fact that this pandemic is one of the worst things to happen in American history. That said, there are silver linings, right? And two pop to mind immediately. Number one, for my clients who are smart, strong, successful women who have everything but the man, you probably know a couple. We mutually know a couple. This has been a tremendous time for reflection, right? So, I'm a corporate lawyer. I make $250,000 a year. I travel internationally for 5 weeks every year. And now I'm at home alone all the time. Is this the life that I want? Is this it? Right? Like, it's really like it forces you to look at yourself. So for me, selfishly, business has been very good. Even though it's a terrible time for dating, demand for what I do has gone up tremendously since the pandemic began, because people are looking at their lives and reevaluating the same way people are like, hey, do I need to be in the rat race? Do I need to live in the big city and pay the big rent? Like, people are reevaluating.
I could use a nice new sofa.
But people are reevaluating everything.
Right.
So some of them are realizing, I actually do want partnership. I do want unconditional love and support and affection and someone to be by my side instead of this. Real life often masks that. If you keep really busy, you don't have to look at your own loneliness. Now we're forced to look at it. The second way that coronavirus has been, dare I say, good for women in dating is that it's in a, I don't know what you know about dating these days since you're a married woman, but in a day and age where most dating takes place via dating app and texting, it's forced men to some degree to slow down against their will. Usually they'll get online, swipe right, you're hot, let's meet, hook up. Those guys are kind of out of business. You can't just show up at someone's house. I mean, you can, but for the most part, you can't just show up at someone's house for sex right now, sight unseen, and expect to get away with that. So guys have to do a little bit more courtship. They have to do a little bit more emailing and phone calling and FaceTiming, and to even get to the point where someone's willing to meet you in person. So in that way, it's forced people to slow down, which overall is good for women in dating.
So you can't, I think just as we're all going to need like a COVID vaccination certificate to travel in the future, you'll probably need it to date as well.
There's been the New York Times articles that, the best thing you could put in your dating profile right now is vaccinated. Like that's the hottest ticket to get someone's attention. And but I feel like there's always naturally, news is the propensity to focus on what's wrong. I am always trying to find the silver lining, right? Or the glass half full, because whatever your circumstances are, you got to make the best of it. So is it a shitty time? Yeah. Are people in my Love You course dating and falling in love? Yeah. Like time hasn't completely stopped.
One of the things last time you were on, and this is of course your specialty of not just coaching women who are the clients who come to you, but going through, I don't want to put a negative spin, but a lot of tips on what they're doing wrong. Or even, I think of you more as a woman whisperer, that you are able to, in an incredibly articulate and empathetic way, convey what we would call the male view of things.
I am a mansplainer. That's right.
You are, but in the best sense.
It's sympathetic. I'm breaking like the man code to say, here's what the thing that you can't seem to understand that he's thinking. Here's what we're actually thinking: the good, the bad, and the ugly. And with this information, you could make more powerful, informed decisions.
Right. So
anyway.
So this time, I want to flip the tables a little, and talk about. I think a lot of women today, especially those who are dating, and especially maybe younger women, are saying, what the hell is wrong with men? Let's take COVID out of the equation for a moment. That men seem to be less willing to commit. Like 35 is the new 27, that they just seem more immature. Is that a fair assessment? That's certainly what I hear from the younger women I speak to.
Okay. I think most criticism is valid. Sometimes it's just way off the mark. But I think most criticism, if it's in good faith, again, and you travel in political circles, so you can think of those kind of things. Any right-wing critique of the left probably has a basis in reality, and vice versa. It's not just like some cooked-up fantasy in a lab. Mm-hmm. Right. So women's critiques of men are 100% valid. Right. My issue is that it's never the whole story. It's only a piece of the story. And that's where we go wrong. Right. It becomes men are X. Men are all interested in sex. Men are not interested in commitment. Men are always looking for the next best thing. Men are too focused on youth and beauty. Men are really immature. Men are toxic narcissists. And suddenly we've got this narrative where it becomes the defining characteristic of men. Mm-hmm. So what I try to do is provide validation. Yes, everything you're experiencing is real. It's not just in your head. But that's not all men, even if we acknowledge that it's a majority of men. We don't need to date a majority of men. You need one. So I will validate, okay, 90% of men are worthless for you. College educated, 6-figure earner, big city. 90% of men, definitely not your husband. Okay, great. Let's focus on the 10% and how you could be more effective with that 10%. So it's like everything here, it's a very nuanced point of view. Acknowledging all the bad without dismissing it and saying you're being silly or stupid or not. No, men are more likely to delay marriage until they have, especially take millennials, it's harder to get a career off the ground now than it ever has been before. So I went to Duke University. Me and all my best friends were single at age 34. We were all married by 38 and kids by 40. We didn't conspire. That's just where we landed.
Right. And that is, I mean, marriage is being pushed further down the line, age-wise. I think well, we know that's true. But also there's fewer people are actually getting married. So marriage as a concept, I mean, statistically.
Yeah, but that's also a yes, but.
Okay.
Because people who are the people who are opting out of marriage for the most part are poorer and less educated. So you got 50% of kids born to 20 to 30-year-olds being born out of wedlock. Mm-hmm. That's true. Those people aren't getting married. But if you're a college-educated woman over the age of 30 getting married for the first time, you're very likely to get married and you're less likely to get divorced. It's only like a 20% divorce rate, not like a 40% divorce rate. So the older you are, the more mature you are, the more stable you are, the more life experience you have, the more likely you are to make a good relationship choice in your 30s. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It's not like marriage as an institution is dying. It's really not.
So you mentioned in one of your podcasts, and I thought this was very insightful, that from the outside looking in as a woman looking into the male world, it's what we were talking about. You don't have a lot of incentive to settle down early. You don't have the economic incentive for sure. And there's no societal pressure upon you really to get married. And you can contradict me, but you also talked about men being lonely. And you said this, speaking to women, of course, you said, so here's something that you may not know about men. It's really lonely being a guy, really lonely. And I've been writing about this on my blog for years. But if you haven't been reading my blog, talk to a bunch of middle-aged men. Ask them. You get no attention. You're rarely in touch with your formerly close friends from high school or college. You don't get much validation. I mean, this is also what middle-aged women complain of, too.
But here's, I think, a difference.
Yeah.
Middle-aged women have each other. My wife has 1,000 moms on text message because she's involved in the PTA at school, and so she is in touch with the whole world. I kind of know their husbands from when our families get together. Mm-hmm. That's the difference. So there is, loneliness is a universal condition. Every night your head hits the pillow, you're alone in your head. Some people are alone even in a marriage, they feel really alone. So I want to acknowledge that. But men are less likely to have friend networks, right? They just don't, in the same way where my wife can say, hey, here's my stroller strides group. Here's my class mom group. Here's my group from book club. Guys have fantasy football, and they're not even particularly nice to each other when they play fantasy football, right? And when you're the fantasy football commissioner like I am, and you try to get together in person, everybody comes up with an excuse why he can't, because his wife has him scheduled for all the things that she wants to do. Yeah. So there is this thing that's unique to men, which is hard for women to understand. And I can even point it through my own work. I give dating advice to women in a course called Love You. I've got a community of women, hundreds of women in a Facebook group, in this online course, on these group coaching calls. There's no Love You for men. There's no place for men to share their vulnerabilities and their insecurities and their fears about not being accepted, not being good enough for women, making bad mistakes in their past marriage. There's no place for this. So guys, keep it inside. So then we get into these other conversations about what masculinity is and vulnerability is and what's toxic and what's innate versus societal. And it becomes a really interesting conversation when you choose to kind of open it up and unpeel that onion. But on the surface, I would if I were to throw a dart at a 50-year-old woman and a 50-year-old man, I can almost guarantee the 50-year-old woman talks to her friends infinitely more.
I don't think I've ever discussed this on the podcast, but for many years now, I've been sourcing all my meat from local farms and farmers markets. And that's not just because I care about how humanely the animals my family consumes are treated. I care a lot about that. But when food is well raised, it just tastes better. That's true of vegetables. Think fresh summer tomato versus one of those red, waxy, tasteless balls you get at the supermarket this time of year. It's also true of meat. So I'm thrilled to have Moinkbox as a sponsor of the podcast. Moinkbox, yes, that seems to be a combo of moo and oink, Moinkbox, delivers grass-fed and grass-finished beef and lamb, pastured pork and chicken, and wild-caught Alaskan salmon direct to your door, helping family farms become financially independent outside of big agriculture. Their animals are raised outdoors, their fish swim wild in the ocean, and Moink meat is free of antibiotics, hormones, sugar, and all the other junk you find in prepackaged meat in the meat aisle. So sign up at moinkbox.com/femsplainers to get a year of ground beef for free, and then pick what meats you want delivered with your first box. Change what you get each month and cancel anytime. And Moink just doesn't offer butcher cut meats. They have incredible bratwurst sandwiches, and that ground beef they send you makes the juiciest hamburgers. Moink was founded by an 8th generation farmer who was featured on Shark Tank. Host Kevin O'Leary said it's the best bacon he's ever tasted. And I agree. And Jamie Siminoff, creator of the Ring video doorbell, invested in Moink. They'll guarantee you'll say, "Oink, oink, I'm just so happy I got moinked." So again, you can go to Moink, that's MOINK box, one word, moinkbox.com/femsplainers to get a year of ground beef for free. I know you'll enjoy it as much as I do. What do you, I understand your clients being women, but what do you hear from men? Like, as you say, it's a poignant image that men don't have these groups to go talk to, these no love yous. What do you think their concerns or problems, again, I'm not trying to put in a negative light, that they would have in terms of dating women today? Like, what would be some of their beefs? I gave you a very common beef about, men seeming to be immature and not wanting to commit and having no pressure. Do you think there's an equivalent complaints that men would have about women from your experience?
Let's take the purest, basest, shallowest arguments. So, and again, I'm going to step in something right now, so forgive me in advance to all the listeners. So, if we take the pure, caricature of feminism,
yeah,
right. Men are, shallow, immature, toxic, insensitive to women's needs. They expect women. It's the red pill community. The men going their own way. Right. If you know anything about that world,
yes.
Right. It's
yes.
these guys who've dubbed themselves alphas, but are really just jerks. Right. Who think that women should be subordinate and exist to just look pretty.
Right. Their anger and rejection has turned into a kind of misogyny.
Right. So that's one side. And then there's the other side that talks about all men as if they're those men. Right. That's the radical feminists who hate those men. And they're forgetting all the men in between. So you have a subset of men who look at women as if they're, entitled, masculine energy, critical harpies. Like their view is every man is their worst nightmare. It's Hillary Clinton waiting to castrate them. That's their perception of American women. And it's false. And then there's the other side. Rape culture is everywhere. Men completely devalue women's contribution to the world. Right? Mm-hmm. Right? Kill men, hate men, hashtag whatever. And so the real dialogue's in the middle of that bell curve. It's not those things, but do each of those sides have somewhat of a valid critique? Sure. Are there a lot of men who are overgrown man-childs? Yeah, there's a whole Trumpian universe of guys like that, and they should not. We should not pay any attention to them. They don't even exist as far as we're concerned. But if you're a man and your experience is going out with women who've been burned by men and they don't trust you and they interrogate you on the date and they expect you to commit and stop seeing anybody the second you start talking online, or they think that just because you have sex that therefore you signed a contract for life, or that they're really focused on how much money you make and how you court them, whether you're using old school chivalry, right? If you're a man and you've had that experience with women, and again, I was a younger man, 25 to 35 going through this, but I can only imagine if you're 45, 55, to go out with a whole bunch of divorced women who bring their issues to you and treat you as if you're the composite of all the worst men they've dealt with in their past. That is a very valid critique of women, right? That's why, again, I don't even worry about the gender piece of it. Is almost immaterial. We have to validate that women have an experience with men that they find unpleasant, and a lot of men are unsuitable, and men, good men, have a lot of experience with women that they find unsuitable. And my job is to be the good representative man for those women and explain what those good men are thinking. I just did it last night on a coaching call. And I had a client break down and start crying because she realized she was so critical of her ex. She couldn't help herself. She was trying to mold him into being the man she wanted him to be, but it was mostly based on fear. And so it doesn't mean she's a bad person. It doesn't let all of her exes off the hook for being jerks, but we are only responsible for our behavior. And so if we can get everybody to look inward and take responsibility for not just who they are and how they show up in a relationship, but for their relationship choices. If a man dates a woman who's 20 years younger and is a gold digger, is it her fault that she's a gold digger, or is it his fault that he married the gold digger? We have to look at that. And if you married some guy because he's tall, cute, rich, and charismatic, but he treats you poorly, how much is that on him and how much is it on you for staying with him? These are the challenging questions that we try to get to the core of. And I don't think there's like an answer, but I do think very much like politics, there's some shared reality in that Venn diagram, and then there's sort of overlapping perspectives. How does this affect me as a man? How does this affect me as a woman? Does it make any sense? Because I know I'm kind of spinning here.
No, it makes total sense. And you raise one aspect of fear. And part of me wonders, there just seems to be, again, I'm making mass generalizations, but hey, we're talking about love. We're allowed to.
Sure.
There just seems to be a breakdown of dialogue between men and women. Right. That they're both, there's this mutual fear. You're raising your hand. Go.
I'm raising my hand because it's so obvious. Danielle, this is politics. It's the same thing. Yeah. It's politics. We've stopped hearing each other. We've ceded the center. The center is where bipartisanship takes place, where compromise takes place. Because right, it's bipartisanship. We could move the country in a better place. Take a little from column A, a little from column B, listen to each other, validate each other. That's the best way to run a country. And that's the best way to run a marriage. But when you're dating and you see the other side is almost the enemy, and that they have to disprove your theory of the worst, right? Where men have to overcome that, the perception that he's going to be a liar or a loser or a player or a slacker. Right? I have nothing to do with your previous experiences with men. I am an innocent man being treated like a criminal. Mm-hmm. Women come to me asking, so when should I ask him about how, what he makes? When should I ask him how many people he slept with? When should I ask him if he's looking for marriage? When should I ask him about his relationship with his mom? I was like, you don't interrogate. It's not how you get anywhere in life. You don't interrogate people. But people are so afraid of making a mistake that they feel that they must do this. This is their way of vetting. So people become really bad at dating. Men and women alike, they interrogate each other because they've had so many bad experiences. Hey, just so you know, before we go on this second date, if we get married, we're going to do a prenup. Oh, that's really sexy, Brad. Thanks for telling me. Hey, just so you know, you're not getting laid. Right? I don't care if you want to, but I'm just letting you know, Brad, you're not getting laid. Okay. Thanks for letting me know. Thanks for taking all the excitement out of this date. So people just blurt this stuff out under the guise of being transparent and not getting hurt and not wasting time. But what they're doing is kind of ignoring what makes the act of discovery, right? The courtship, flirtation process is what allows people to forge bonds. It's not a negotiation. Oh, I can tell from your profile, you have a dog. Are you willing to get rid of your dog? Because I'm allergic. People are doing that in their emails and their texts.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know about you and David, but my wife and I are from different faiths. Right. So if I went on the first date and I said, hey, I know you went to 16 years of Catholic school, but just so you know, I want to have Jewish kids. I would have negotiated myself out of a wife.
Yeah.
That's bad dating technique.
But I get it. But where is this miscommunication and mistrust coming from, do you think?
Okay. I mean, from the, right, again, I don't even want to use the term, but from people's real lived experience, right? Right. Every woman's gone out with some guy who lied about his online dating profile, and he said he was 49, but he was really 60. And so then she's averse to that. I'm not ready to date a 60-year-old guy. I'm still a young woman. So then she puts in her profile, no liars. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a nice ad. No liars. That makes you look good. So this is how it begins. We have bad experiences. The bad experiences pile up and pile up and pile up. And then we think we need to be defensive to ward off the bad experiences to prevent them from happening. But it never works.
Isn't that in part, I mean, you've been there at the beginning from the sort of online dating, which I guess you started, in 2003?
I started coaching in 2003. I was an early adopter of online dating from around 1997.
Right. So like right at the beginning. And then it was considered a bit weird, right, to go find someone online rather than meet them in real life.
My first book was called I Can't Believe I'm Buying This Book because people thought it was weird. So yes, it was stigmatized. And then New York Times did a magazine cover story. Jennifer Egan, the novelist, did a magazine cover story about online dating in which I was quoted. And online dating became mainstream almost as of that moment. It was like the tipping point where people were like, well, everybody's doing it. We might as well talk about it. And now with coronavirus, our original topic, it's the only game in town. You better figure out how to date online successfully.
Well, you had, I want to hear first how you think it's changed dynamics between men and women, because part of what you're saying to me about the way people talk, and they're just so blunt and they blurt things out, it's like they're so used to being online now that you've lost, as you say, that kind of language of courtship, that etiquette. And part of me wonders how much is it just to blame to the swipe left, right culture, and just how much we just spend all of our time texting, and these are the new ways we talk to each other. And then, sorry. Speak to that.
It's okay. You brought up a lot of really interesting things, so I'm sitting here taking notes.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know, 5-6 years ago, I've lost track. I did a TEDx talk. I'm not important enough for TED, but TEDx in Newfoundland, Canada would have me. And it was called No More Bad Dates. There's, a bunch of comments, most of them ripping me a new one on YouTube. And the premise of it is exactly what we're talking about here. And so I want to consolidate that into the next 3 minutes for you. Over time, technology, right, has been designed to make transactions frictionless. Right? I can have an Apple Wallet. I don't even have to put in my credit card number. I can click on the thing. So how do we make things frictionless? Frictionless technology, Silicon Valley, good. Anything that makes things easier, transactions easier, is good. The problem is when you make transactions easier in dating, it turns dating into something that's transactional, and it shouldn't be transactional. It should be relational. So old school online dating, when I used to do it, Match.com, JDate, blah, 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 you'd have a long written profile, a couple 100-word essay. You'd write an email based on what that person wrote in the essay. Hey, Danielle, I read your profile. I really like that you're into this and this. Made me think of this and this. You'd have a conversation. And this is akin to two people meeting at a party in real life. Mm-hmm. Right? I don't just tap you on the shoulder and be like, hey, I like your earrings. Here's my number. That's not how people do that. In real life, it's, how do you know the host? This is a great 80s mix. Awesome charity we're doing this for. What are you drinking? Like, there's some context.
Right.
And then the conversation leads for me to talk to you and say, hey, Danielle, you want to step outside and grab a drink? And you're like, sure. Then we talk for an hour out there. And at the end of the night, oh my God, it's getting late. Could I get your phone number? And you write it on a napkin. And then I bronze that thing because that's a big night. I got a woman's phone number. I worked for that. Imagine that same party where there's a lineup of 100 guys behind me with napkins. That's dating
but
apps.
No game. I mean, not even a let's step outside and
that's right. But that's dating apps.
Yeah.
So that's our problem. We've taken a shallow medium like online dating and we've removed the depth from it. We've removed the profile. We've removed the email. Dating apps, in case you don't know, because you're a married woman, are faces and one-line bios.
Right.
And you swipe right if the person is cute enough. And if you make a match, then you start texting. So the ability to get someone's phone number, Danielle, I could get 100 phone numbers in a night. It's been devalued. And when something's devalued, how seriously do we take it? Why should a man take you seriously if he could watch TV, eat dinner, and swipe right on 100 women? Why is your phone number more precious than the other 100 women he swiped right on? That's where we are. It's actually leveled the playing field where women used to have a great upper hand because men would approach them. The guy has to put himself out and get rejected. Now it's average, below average guys could do this all day.
Yeah.
Right? Swipe right all day and get a ton of phone numbers. And how many do you think they could go out with on Saturday night? So people think that swiping right and texting is some sort of meaningful exchange when it's actually a bottom of the barrel exchange. And that's why we've got this level of dissatisfaction, is because the technology has enabled people, the way Twitter has enabled people to take nuanced discussions and turn them into 280 characters. This has enabled people to commodify dating like a slot machine, gamify it. So now they're not people, they're just faces on a screen, and they're disposable. And we all, men and women, feel disposable when we're using it, but we don't think we could stop.
Okay, now I'm super depressed because now you've of course said that this is what we have to do, and especially in COVID.
It's not, I said what we have to do. I said It's what people are doing.
Okay, so give me some hope. Give some of our online daters some hope here. What do you tell them?
Well, again, think of any technology that was intended to do X but actually performs Y. And it's easy to use Twitter. It's easy to use Facebook. It was intended to connect the world, but it also contributed to the misinformation of the world. So what are we going to do about that? That's really the question. Is me standing on my soapbox is not going to stop Tinder and Bumble from existing. But what I can do is teach the women who are taking my view, who are open to this kind of dialogue. Here's how you could approach dating in such a way that you don't fall into those traps of texting a guy who's texting 100 other women at the same time. And so, it's what the TED Talk was about. It's basically a way to avoid texting and to stay away from apps. You don't have to do, if everybody's going to zig, I'm going to zag, because doing what everybody else is doing that's making them miserable, that's just a recipe for disaster. So I just recommend, in a nutshell, go on a conventional online dating site with a conventional profile, make a connection. Make a connection like on that. Yeah.
Match.com, which seems like that's perceived as for older people, but
I know. I mean, I know how I sound.
I'm sorry, but you actually had a podcast on this, that why you recommend, for this reason, Match.com over Tinder or
conventional dating sites. I mean, again, I've heard Hinge is the deepest of all shallow apps. So if you're going to use an app, you go to Hinge, but you're still in the swiping culture, the volume culture. And I'm looking for quality, not volume. So in my belief, people just bounce from site to site to site looking for the site that's going to work for them. And where do they land? They land on the lowest common denominator. What's the easiest thing to do? You asked about what men are doing wrong. It's not wrong for them. It's wrong for women. They're going to the lowest common denominator. What requires less effort, Danielle, than looking at your photos, swiping right and texting, hey, want to hang out? And if you're the woman who's rewarding men for doing that, what could you expect from them? If that's how easy it is to get a date with you, is a swipe, a text, and a let's hang out, women are not raising the bar high enough. So what I try to teach women to do is to put men through a courtship process that they don't even know they're going through, that is akin to what we were talking about, that real life interaction. Make a guy work for it a little bit. Make it fun, make it flirty, make a connection on the dating site, go to Gmail, schedule a phone call, a FaceTime, a Zoom, something, anything to get stuck in texting, to avoid getting stuck in texting hell. But as long as you're on an app and getting stuck in texting hell, there's no solution for you. It's just a volume problem. But I don't think the solution to successful dating is more volume. You've read or heard of Barry Schwartz's The Paradox of Choice. More choices don't make us happy. We just demand it as a society in the internet age. But more choices don't make us happy. We just can't resist.
This episode is sponsored in part by Apostrophe, a prescription skincare company for people that are ready to take their acne seriously. Prescription acne treatment really works, but it's hard to get. You have to take time off work to see a doctor and sit in line at the pharmacy for your medications until Apostrophe. Apostrophe makes it easy to see a board-certified dermatologist online. You'll get treated immediately, and your medications are delivered to your home. Simply fill out Apostrophe's online questionnaire about your skin concerns and medical history. Then just snap a few selfies, and your dermatologist will get back to you with a customized treatment plan tailored just for you. And the best part is that Apostrophe offers topical and oral medications so that you can treat your acne from the inside out and the outside in. Apostrophe treats acne, and they can also help you hit your other skincare goals like reducing redness, wrinkles, and even dark spots. What I like best about Apostrophe is knowing that I consulted with a real dermatologist and that my plan was tailored. And submitting my visit was quick, and I didn't need to schedule an appointment. This is especially great during COVID. So get $15 off your first visit with a board-certified dermatologist at apostrophe.com/femsplainers. That's AP as in Peter, OSTROPHE, apostrophe.com/femsplainers, and use our code FEMSPLAINERS. This code is only available to our listeners. So to get started, just go to apostrophe.com/femsplainers and click Begin Visit, and then use code FEMSPLAINERS at sign up, and you'll get $15 off your dermatology visit. That's apostrophe.com/femsplainers, and use that code FEMSPLAINERS to get your dermatology visit for $15 off. And we thank Apostrophe for sponsoring this podcast. One of the other things I'm struck by is when I read, I think I may have even talked about this on the podcast before, but the risk of repetition. One of my favorite columns I read is in the Washington Post, where they set up two people on a blind date. So they have that I actually once did this. Of course I failed, but you're given a whole bunch of, you're given either the man or the woman, and then you're given a bunch of profiles and resumes to you choose the person that designated person is going to go out with. And I'm really struck by how many of the dates you read about go really, really well. And even on some of these Zoom calls, since COVID, they've done this column with a couple of Zoom calls, and they talked for like you said, they talked for 3 hours. They found they had a lot in common, but then they found the other person had many things that interested them that they'd never thought about, blah, blah, blah. Follow up, no second date, end of contact. And then you read, well, what were the reasons? And obviously they're talking to a newspaper, so you can't hope they're probably being a little more polite than they might be, maybe a little more disingenuous about what they thought of the other person. But it's still a little bit like Jerry Seinfeld saying, I just didn't like the way she ate her peas, that a lot of the things seem very trivial. And I worry about, in this environment of this swipe left, right culture, that even when you get a good thing landing in your lap, that to put in that extra effort to maybe have a second date, it just doesn't happen. People just drop that ball and wait to pick up the next one. Do you come across that?
Yeah, I mean, it's my day job.
Don't mean to get all your secrets out of you, Evan.
No, there are no secrets. Everything I say in LaView is stuff that I say publicly. I think it's people don't know what metrics to look for when they're choosing a partner, and it's something that it's very hard to explain as a coach and as a happily married person, because you don't want to negate someone's preferences. Most people in general will prefer tall to short, fit to fat, rich to poor. You can't blame people for having preferences. Mm-hmm. The problem is those preferences don't necessarily equate to a happy marriage. I can hand you a guy who is tall and successful and powerful and charismatic and was president. But it doesn't mean that you're going to be in a happy marriage with that person, right? So the list that people look for when they go online, and they do, they go online and they look for the list. They'll look at his face, is he cute? And then they'll go scroll down and look for his height, and they'll scroll down and look for his education, and then they'll scroll down and look for his job or his income. This is the way most women look online, right? And so even if I hand you a guy who's got all those qualities, he may not be kind. He may not be a good communicator. He may not be commitment oriented. He may not have high character. He may not be consistent in how he treats you. So I can hand you the guy who's perfect on paper based on the profile, but the profile doesn't reveal what kind of person he is. So we're trying to always thread those two needles simultaneously. Obviously you have to be somewhat attracted to someone, right? You have to have at least some measure of positive chemistry. You shouldn't have to talk yourself into going out with anybody. Honestly, there's enough people in the universe you don't have to talk yourself into. But does it have to be the 10 plus chemistry to go on a second date? No. And a lot of women think that it does. And so that's why I have a job, is to just remind them. Every time you've gone for 10 plus chemistry, it didn't work. So what is that a real good arbiter of your future romantic success? And what happens if you go on a date with a guy who isn't exactly your type and you discover you're having fun? That's usually what happens. We really want to get women to trust their feelings instead of their first impressions. So we can't negate first impressions. You can never make someone go out with someone online that they are objectively not attracted to. That's a losing battle. And I'll tell women, if you're open to 10% of guys, you're going to do fine. If you go through 1,000 guys and you're only open to 5, we've discovered your source of your problem. You're the bottleneck, right? If you're familiar with Lori Gottlieb, you know Lori?
No.
I feel like you should. There's some similar worlds. Lori wrote a best-selling book 2 years ago, 2019, called Maybe You Should Talk to Someone, about therapy. And it's amazing, amazing book. And she's a close friend of mine for 20 years out here. And her previous book was called Marry Him, The Case for Settling for Mr. Good Enough. And I coached her while she was writing that book. And that became a different kind of New York Times bestseller, but she basically got destroyed by the feminist press.
I remember there was a book called The Good Enough Marriage.
Well, this Laura's book was Marry Him, The Case for Settling for Mr. Good Enough was the title.
Right.
She didn't come up with the title. Publisher came up with the title to generate controversy. But the moral of the story was, hey, she went to Stanford, she went to Yale, she sold her childhood diaries. She's a superstar. So she was holding out for another guy who was like her and kept on passing up guys. And when she finally had kids, when she through a sperm donor when she was 39, and she realized she got her kid, but she didn't get the life she wanted. She didn't get the marriage she wanted. She started to reflect, what did I do wrong? Maybe I should have gone out and, I hate to reduce it to numbers, but maybe I should have given a chance to the guy who was an 8 instead of holding out for the 10. Because now that I'm a 40-year-old single mom, the guys available to me are 5s. That was her central thesis, was I overplayed my hand, right? If you're a woman in your 30s and you want to have biological kids, don't hold out for some fantasy guy, the male version of you, because you can end up like me. It was a cautionary tale. So that cautionary tale plays out not just with women, it plays out with men. I got a couple single guy friends, and they're still holding out for some fantasy 33-year-old woman who's brilliant, hot, and ready to start having children yesterday because he's 48 and wants kids. Right? These guys overplayed their hands. This is not a gender-specific thing.
Right.
So
the thing is they get to wait longer than women do on the biological front.
Yes, but if you're a 34-year-old woman, do you want to bring on a 50-year-old guy to be the father of your children? So he's 70 when your kids are graduating high school? No, these guys are kind of screwed too. So no, it's not the same biological clock. It's not as urgent, but essentially everything is economics. Everything is supply and demand. So if you or I were to say, go out and get a job, and I said, I'm worth $2 million a year. That's what I'm worth. I know what I'm worth. I'm not settling it for a penny less. If nobody were to hire me, I would have to lower my salary demand.
Right.
And so what's happening is a lot of people are keeping their salary demands really high and discovering there's no market for them, but they won't lower their salary demand. And that's what happens with people who are trying to decide, am I too picky? Well, the market dictates whether you're too picky. And no one is encouraging you to settle, because the answer is not to settle. It's to compromise on the right things. If you're a woman who makes $200,000, you can go out with a guy who makes 90 and have a really nice life. That's not settling.
Right.
Settling is dating a guy who's a self-made millionaire who travels 30 weeks a year and has a mistress. That's settling.
All right. This is so informative. Before you go, I have 3 quick questions to help our listeners this coming Valentine's Day. What would you suggest, both male and female single listeners, coming up to this Valentine's Day, what should be the one thing they should take away from this in terms of looking forward, finding the right person? I know that's a big ask to put it in one, but what would you say to them?
So we're talking to single people, not people who are in relationships and are worried about Valentine's Day. This is just Valentine's Day advice for single people.
Yeah, unless you want to throw in something for couples, and that would be a bonus.
Now, if you're a happy couple, you're doing fine. You don't need me. But single people, I'd like to think I could provide a service. So usually the biggest thing that I see, and maybe it's because it's a recency effect. I just had this conversation twice with clients yesterday. Consider a smart, strong, successful woman. Again, I use that phrase liberally. You don't have to consider yourself all of the above, but someone who is a hard worker, bright, determined, organized, puts 40, 50 hours a week into work and has for 15, 20 years. You can imagine someone like that, right, Danielle? Mm-hmm. How much time and energy has she put into her work? Where has that time and energy gotten her? Well, it's gotten her to buy her own home. It's gotten her the ability to see other countries. It's gotten her the ability to save for retirement, to own some nice things. That time and energy put in to getting into work at 8:30 and getting out of work at 6:30, that discipline to work hard, do your best, problem solve, not get too bent out of shape when things don't work, is the exact same discipline that it takes to find love. And if you can apply a fraction of that effort, intentionality, consistency, and resilience to your love life, you're going to do great in your love life. So what I do, again, it's not a sales pitch. What I do is take women and give them a dating practice. Right? And it's not a secret. Here's your dating practice that we teach everybody in Love U. Get online for a half hour a day. Flirt with guys. Speak with about 7 to 10. Have about 7 to 10 active conversations. Doesn't mean you talk to all of them every day. But you're talking to 7 to 10 guys. They're in rotation. Since most of them are not going to pan out. Most of them are going to say something weird or perverted or flaky or negative. So if you're talking to 7 to 10, only 1 or 2 of them is going to get to the point where they're even allowed to talk to you on the phone. So if you have a daily practice, the way you have a yoga practice, a meditation practice, a workout routine, a nighttime routine, a beauty routine, if you could have a daily dating practice for a half hour where you churn through leads and see which ones turn into real opportunities, you can go on 1 quality pre-screen date a week until you find your husband. That's all it takes is consistency, the same consistency you use in every other aspect of your life instead of this.
I loved how you said at one point in one of your podcasts that, you're unemployed. You don't then sit home and say, oh, well, a job will just happen. Someday it'll come to me maybe, but that's not my focus right now.
Well, we think, Danielle, and again, to a degree, it's true that because, I need to eat, I need to put food on the table, I need a roof over my head, we have to work hard. But then you realize I'm working 40, 50 hours a week, but I'm not happy. I'm disconnected. I'm lonely. Right? But we don't put a fraction of that effort. So I'm not saying you quit your job to go look for love full time.
No, but it's not going to, as you say, you have to be proactive. It's not just going to.
But put it on your calendar. Make it a thing. Make it an appointment. Right? The same way you do with other things in your life, whether it is eating lunch, showering, working out, and riding your Peloton. If you give this thing a half hour a day and you learn from the data, you learn from your experience, there's nowhere to go but forward. If you go on one date a week, you got 50 chances in a year to find love. If you sort of wait to smile at a cute guy through a mask, you might go on 2 dates this year. What's more likely to get you to your destination?
Okay, so you've actually covered 2 of my questions in one, because I was going to do a separate takeaway for women, but that's, of course, great advice for women. What about for men? What should they think about this Valentine's Day if they're alone?
I would say that, like most of this advice, I mean, I'm a dating coach for women only because women ask for help and men don't. But everything I just said about women is equally applicable to men. Take your love life seriously. And if you're dating for a relationship and you're dating for marriage, try to treat women as individuals instead of faces that you're texting. If every guy is going to zig, you should zag. Right? That's putting in a little more energy, getting to know someone, distinguishing yourself from the pack, encouraging a FaceTime, maybe a follow-up FaceTime, not pushing to move too fast or get laid too quickly. Just differentiating yourself from the other cretins out there will go a very long way in separating you from the pack of men that she's dealing with if she's a quality woman online. Next, finally, most of the successful love stories I've been privy to witness take place on the margins. And what I mean by the margins is it's not always what you pictured or what you fantasized about. Right? So my story is I was a 34-year-old guy who really wanted to get married and start a family, and I was online looking for women 27 to 34. Right? Women who were like me. What I didn't realize is that online at the same time was my wife, who was 3 years older than I was and was a different religion. And we were not looking for each other. So expand, open your aperture to more people, right? If you're a 50-year-old guy, hypothetically, and you're looking for women 25 to 35, oh, please stop, right? There is a woman your age who's smoking hot, who is dying for a good guy like you who made a terrible mistake in his first marriage. And if you widen your aperture and give more women a chance, there's a criminally underlooked population of women your age and a couple years older. And if you're not trying to have kids, give them a chance. It'll be the best decision you ever made.
Okay, that's great advice. I was thinking last week we were talking about, we've been trying to hire an intern on this podcast. And in fact, I think we found one, which is exciting. But one of the things I took away from having to do all these job interviews with these potential candidates was how much, and this is totally common, how many came to the interview telling me why the job would be good for them. And, as the kind of experience I want, and nobody thinking going into the interview, obviously the employer wants to know how I'm going to be good for them. And I think it's true with dating that we go in and you're looking at him thinking, how are you going to be good for me? Vice versa, without opening yourself and thinking, how am I going to be great for this other person? And I
think it's an amazing observation, Danielle. I think it's a pitch perfect one. And I will say that I think women are more guilty of it than men. Because men go on dates, right, knowing they have to impress. I got 90 minutes. And so what do? Did I tell you about, how I was on the football team in high school? Did you know I was a 6 handicap in golf? Did you know that I once had a threesome? I just thought you should know that. So guys, yap, yap, yap. They're selling themselves all the time, right? To impress her because he thinks she needs to be impressed, right? It's actually women, in my experience, who don't think at all. She's also thinking he has to sell her. What am I getting out of this? She's not spending any time thinking about what he gets out of it. Mm-hmm. That is, again, why I think I have a job, is to just point out that in dating, a guy who's good at dating is going to put aside his needs and focus on what you want. Call, plan, pay, pick up the check, follow up quickly, listen to your stories. Like, a good date, that's what a guy does. If I were coaching men, that's what I tell them to do. Right? But if I'm coaching women, you have to give men what they want. It can't just be about you. And most people are completely tone deaf. But I'm supposed to do something on a first date, like besides just like get dressed up? What am I supposed to do?
Right.
And if you don't have an answer for why he's going to choose you, that's cause for soul searching. He's not choosing you because you're the senior vice president. He's not choosing you because you're fluent in Spanish. If he makes his own money, he's not choosing you because you make money. So
and there's always a hotter chick on the next swipe through.
Right. So why is he going to choose you?
Right.
So guys go out and brag about themselves, and women are like, could you shut these guys up? But there's great value in thinking, what is my customer? When I write people's dating profiles, right, that's what I do. I ask them to tell me a dozen stories about what makes them a great girlfriend. Oh, you're intelligent? How does your intelligence benefit a man? You're fun? Give me a story about something fun you did with an ex-boyfriend. Right? It's marketing. You've got to speak to your target audience. So the more we can understand this dynamic and give the opposite sex what they need, then we can have a lot of really happy people. But most of us go online and we write our profiles. I like hiking, biking, fishing, movies, music, travel. No one cares. All we care about is what I get out of dating you, what you get out of dating me.
Yeah. Well put. All right. Well, Evan, that's been fantastic advice. Thank you. I'm hoping next year we'll have a non-pandemic Valentine's Day, but
it would be better.
This is a chance for old-fashioned courtship, conversations, getting to know you. So I'm pleased you began with the upsides of this because I think we need to hear them.
I think there are. That's not just bullshit. I genuinely believe if you can, instead of blaming guys for being so terrible at online dating, which they are, let's say, how do we elevate these conversations? If it's one-line text exchanges, how do you write something better that elicits a better response? How do you lead him to schedule a phone call with you instead of texting back and forth where you're wondering when you're ever going to hear from him again? How do we tighten the loop so that it becomes a little bit more like real-life dating? And since guys are never going to do what you want them to do, it's up to you to lead them down the path you want them to go on, because they're not going to do it themselves. In their opinion, it's in their best interest to text 100 women at once and say, are you up? So how do you get a guy to act against that interest? You have to be better. You have to be warmer, more enthusiastic, more flirtatious, and more cunning than the average person who volleys one-line text back and forth and wonders why nothing gets off the ground.
Yeah, well, that's good advice. All right, Evan, thank you so much for joining us again. Good luck with everything. And everybody else, happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day. Thank you for having me, Danielle.
You know that credit card, the one that you're afraid to look at to see what the balance is? If you've been avoiding your debt, it's time to confront it. And Upstart can help you face it and finally pay it off. Upstart is the fast and easy way to get a personal loan to pay off your debt, all online. Whether it's paying off credit cards, consolidating high-interest debt, or funding personal expenses, over 500,000 people have used Upstart to get a simple, fixed monthly payment. Upstart finds smarter rates with trusted partners because they assess more than just your credit score. With a 5-minute online rate check, you can see your rate upfront for loans from $1,000 to $50,000. You can get approved the same day and can receive funds as fast as 1 business day. If debt is taking over your life, it's time to get a fresh start with Upstart. Find out how Upstart can lower your monthly payments today when you go to upstart.com/femsplain. That's upstart.com/femsplain. Don't forget to use our URL to let them know we sent you. Loan amounts will be determined based on your credit income and certain other information provided in your loan application. So go right now to upstart.com/femsplain and get control of your debt. Well, I love having Evan on, not least because he's always super practical and realistic about the sexes, because he's had so many years of experience as a dating coach and also as a man, gets his whole life. I should mention that you can find out more about Evan and love you at his website, evanmarckatz.com. That's Evan, E-V-A-N, Mark with a C, M-A-R-C, Katz, K-A-T-Z.com, evanmarckatz.com. He offers a lot of free articles on dating, and you can also download his podcasts, which are great. I realize that this is the first Valentine's Day episode in which I have not had my husband, David, come on to complain about how much he and men in general hate Valentine's Day. David calls it New Year's Eve with nuclear weapons. So maybe another upside to a pandemic V-Day is that there will be no pressure on them to make expensive restaurant reservations or elaborate plans. But on behalf of women everywhere, I'll note that florists are still delivering and there's takeout. So David, if you're listening, don't forget, I still hold the nuclear codes. That's it for this episode. Remember, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us by becoming a member at patreon.com/femsplainers. And in addition to getting a bonus exclusive episode every month called Last Call, in which you get to join the conversation and ask our guests questions, you'll receive our newsletter and be invited to our monthly virtual cocktail parties. And for $10 a month or more, which can I just mention, that's less than a bunch of flowers, you'll also receive every podcast a day early and ad-free. So stay well, everyone, and happy Valentine's Day. The Femsplainers is a weekly podcast carried on the Ricochet Network and available pretty much on every podcast platform. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and watch video of our interviews on YouTube. You'll find links to everything, plus how to contact us directly at femsplainers.com. We survive and depend on your support. Like the show? Consider donating as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/femsplainers and get our exclusive monthly bonus episode, Last Call, in which you get to join the conversation with our guests. And there's much more. And a big shout out of thanks to our audio and video editor, Nat Frum.